Hello, 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 and welcome to the Jolly Heretic. A belated Merry Christmas. I'm afraid we weren't able to do a Christmas edition, so a belated Merry Christmas and an early Happy New Year. Welcome to the Jolly Heretic. We are, of course, online public house that meets on Mondays at 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York, in which we discuss based science and all kinds of interesting stuff about psychology and stuff like that, which you won't be getting at our woke joke universities. So hello everybody. So yes, so cheers, Kim and Avocado, cheers Lipton, cheers Aaron, cheers Richard, cheers Tew, Hurligan Gulligan, Capis, Saludo, Skoll, Prost, Proust, Slangervar. If Paul was here, he'd say scrub you now or something, but we can't find him.
He's here.
We've emailed his wife.
He says he's here. He says he's in the private chat saying, "I'm here."
All right, out to stage.
Oh yeah, I can see him.
There he is. Paul is here. So Paul would say at this point, "Scrub you now." But so scrub you now. Are you there, Paul? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Excellent. So Paul's here. I just messaged your charming wife, and I asked her if Paul were coming out to play. But
I was waiting backstage, you plonker.
Oh, I see. It's my own. I'm terribly sorry. It's my own fault. It's because I got 4 people already here, so I couldn't see you down below. But fortunately, somebody was eagle-eyed, like eagle-eyed cherry. And so, anyways, so cheers, everybody, and chin chin, and yakida, and all that, and Happy New Year, and welcome to the Jolly Heretic. We have a very special, a new guest today, and I don't know if you. Obviously, we're broadcasting on the Jolly Heretic on my channel, and we're also broadcasting on Richard's more manly channel, the Richard Philosophy channel. But as you know, some of you will know, Richard has a channel aimed at the ladies, aimed at the very beautiful and strong women, strong ladies,
short-sighted.
And very exciting, and a number of us were at Liverpool, at his conference in Liverpool, and he's put our various speeches up, and the most popular by far is that of Darren McGee below. So I can only assume that the ladies of Richard's massive channel really have the hots for you, Darren.
Well, I do that silver fox thing quite well, don't you think?
I do. I certainly think.
I think it's the accent.
Could well be.
Listen to me, ladies. I know you've been abused.
No, but he hasn't got that kind of strong Belfast accent. He doesn't have that. He has that kind of soft, sort of
chocolatey,
more rural Northern Ireland kind of accent, doesn't he? More like you might get around somewhere like. Yes. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a place in Northern Ireland where they sound like that. I'll come up with one in a minute. Anyway,
I'm not actually from Belfast. I just say Belfast because it's the only place anyone would know where I come from. I grew up in a place called Newton Abbey, which is to the north of Belfast. So,
yes, Newton Abbey, and then there's something. Yes, I have a friend, Kenny, in Olu, and he's from what's it called? Where he's from? He's Shards or something. It sounds like. Like it sounds like that, but with and I have a friend from Bangor, and I'm told Bangor is quite middle class. So anyway, yes. So welcome to Darren, and Darren is a therapist and knows a lot about narcissism and stuff like that. And so we will be drawing upon his wisdom. Anyway, yes. So cheers, Monica Nowakowska and Lindsay Pringle and Dubious and Finn Bear. Hello, Finn Bear. How are you doing, Finn Bear? Did you know, Finn Bear? I drove from Olu to Coquelin and back today, which is about a 600-kilometer round trip, I think. So I don't know what that is in English. It's like driving to Edinburgh or something, I think. So yeah, it's a substantial. No, maybe it's not as much as that. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's 400 round. I don't know what it is. Anyway, it's quite far. So Newton Tards, that's it. Newton Ards is Charlie Pepper. Yes, that's it. That's where Kenny is from. If you're watching Kenny, hello, how are you doing? We're probably meeting up on Saturday. So good. Are we talking Indians today? We might discuss the issue of Indians. I've just put up a video on the issue of Indians, Finbar, although we can't put it up on the old YouTube for obvious reasons. So Edinburgh's cancelled the Hogmanay. God. So what we were going to talk about, though, was this new concept that everyone seems to be going on at the moment, which is woke, the woke right. And Darren actually contacted me and said that he has one or two things to say about this. So I think we'll start with that. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, we have two, as it were, I'd like to call them purple-pilled But anyway, two right-wing thinkers, but they, in my view, don't quite go there. James Lindsay, who is an American, and Konstantin Kissin, who is a Russian who lives in the UK. And they both say that people like me, as far as I can work out, are the woke right. And there's a lot, and not just me, but I could, yeah, and Paul agrees apparently. And so he's wrong, obviously, but then he's always wrong. So Darren, what were your thoughts on? Oh yes, I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that, and I'm happy to. Yeah, good, Darren.
Well, first of all, I'm not quite sure what the woke right is. Any bit as much as the woke left. I think there a lot of times we're just using labels, terms to be able to identify certain things. But I think whenever you're looking at people with extreme kind of beliefs, we may be looking at personality types. We've talked about things like the dark personality. I think a lot of the time what you could be looking at are just really opportunists. Just people who might see something that they believe they're going to get some kind of power or validation or some kind of importance from. They latch on to that. And really, that's what they go with. So it's more about opportunism, I think, rather than perhaps having a genuine belief in something. Now, I wouldn't say not all of them are like that, but I would say largely that could be what's going on.
Someone in the chat, Jonathan Shadow, has said grifters. I mean, this term grifter seems to be a general term of abuse for people one doesn't agree with, because
I use it all the time.
Money. Sorry, Lipton.
I use it frequently, and I do think that many of these people on the so-called intellectual dark web, whatever they opt to call it, they are grifters, and I don't like them.
What defines a grifter as opposed to someone that's just making money out of a skill they have?
Okay, so for example, on my Twitter page, I usually say I don't have a problem with people using their talents to make money or even exploiting a chaotic situation. I think it's good to make money. But a grifter is somebody who is not necessarily using his talent to make money. Grifters are not even reading the social environment. They are deliberately exploiting a situation for trolling purposes. They're not politically invested in what they say. They don't care about it. And they often make claims to blackball people or browbeat them into submission.
Right. But if someone, going back to what Darren was saying, couldn't it be argued that everybody kind of finds a niche somewhere? So in a sense, everybody exploits a situation. We all need to find a niche via which we can pursue life. We all do that.
Yes. We all find a niche. We all want to make money. It's not unusual for people to exploit the political situation. But these people, I have contempt for them, and I call them grifters because it is obvious that they don't endorse the ideals that they're pushing. They're deliberately doing it for trolling purposes.
Right. So
so for example, somebody like Candice Owens, who will flip-flop based on the political movement or situation, I would call her a grifter. They're basically sponges. They are absorbing what other people say without understanding it, and they repeat it to get a particular response.
Right.
And some of them, they suffer from audience capture. So they grift so seriously that they don't even know that they're grifting anymore.
Okay. Would anyone else like to intervene with a view on this grifting concept that we've got into?
I would.
Yes.
I think Paul waved his finger there as well.
No, you go first, Richard.
Just to add to what Lipton said, I think it's when somebody is saying something that they don't necessarily believe in with a lack of sincerity. There's a certain hypocrisy to it. And to Lipton's audience capture point, my least charitable view of this woke right thing is that you've got people who are terminally on Twitter and they have to have reactions in order for their economic model to work. And they knew that this would wind people up. And so they hammered this term knowing that it's not a valid term. I just listened to the first 5 minutes of an interview between James Lindsay and Konstantin Kissin. And James Lindsay opens it by saying, this isn't a good term. But they both agree that it has merit, that they're using the term woke here in a disingenuous way. And when we're talking about grifters, and I'm not saying James Lindsay and Konstantin Kisin are grifters, when we're talking about grifters, they're using terms in a deliberately disingenuous way to foster reaction, not to make a point, not to move the conversation forward. It's effectively a form of rage bait. I'll put my mic down.
Yes.
Very nice mic, Richard. We've all been admiring your mic.
Thanks.
Paul.
It looks like an uncircumcised microphone as well.
Of course, brother, of course.
I would just pull one stage back, and my problem is the conceptual vacuity of the things they're saying. So, without wanting to go over old ground, James Lindsay, I think you and I discussed this briefly before, Ed, and with Richard, he was putting out stuff about the Archangel Gabriel and the conspiracy of the Illuminati not long ago.
Michael.
Now, yeah, call me old-fashioned, but that would rule you out as being considered a serious thinker. I honestly thought he'd had some type of emotional breakdown. So my question is, why are people treating someone seriously who's either mentally unstable at best or responsible for all the things you're now accusing him of as a grifter? But what he's actually saying has no intellectual, no conceptual depth whatsoever. And it bewilders me that these things are spoken about endlessly.
It's like calling the left the fascist left. It seems to me that the word fascism. Okay, there's all kinds of debates that go on about the precise meaning of words, but the word fascist is an insult, and therefore it's not really a neutral term of analysis. But if we put that aside, if we can regard fascism as a neutral term of analysis, what do these fascist groups have in common? What is as Roger Eatwell, the political scientist, puts it, what is the fascist minimum? And what he reduces it to is basically it's charismatic leadership, stroke demagoguery. It's demonizing your opponents, and particularly foreigners and leftists, and it's the idea of a national rebirth. That's the essence of fascism, and it is quite a weak metaphor to call people on the left fascist. What you're basically saying is they're authoritarian, but the word communist doesn't have as much vituperative power as fascist, so we'll call them fascist. The fascist left.
It's a slur. It's a slur.
But wasn't it Orwell himself that said, I'm paraphrasing, didn't he say something like the word fascist means nothing other than someone you don't like?
But to all of you, would you accept that there haven't been endless hours and hours, exponential hours discussing fascism? The go-to subject on the internet is wokeness.
Yes.
And it's spoken about endlessly. No intellectual progress is made. You go round and around in circles, and it's a good conceptual vehicle for the internet itself.
Paul,
There's no light being shed whatsoever, but people are addicted to
it. I think a lot of terms are used, such as woke or fascist or whatever it happens to be, and I think they're used from the individual's frame of reference, what slogans and things that they have picked up. And I think it's curious. For instance, I could put a video out and I could talk about something. I could talk about anything. I could talk about weaponized incompetence or something like that. And I will get comments from different people who will say, you're talking about the far left. But on the same video, I'm hearing people saying you're talking about the far right.
Yes.
So a lot of these things are just coming from that individual's frame of reference, what they believe the other side happened to be.
I suppose far right is the other term, though, isn't it? Woke, there's a lot of stuff about woke, and there's a lot of stuff about far right. No one talks about far left. They use the word woke, which is basically meaning far left. And they use the term far right without defining it. Well, but some academics go into it and look at more subtle differences between what they would call the populist right and the radical right, or the populist right and the dissident right. And it could be argued that what Konstantin Kisin is distinguishing between somehow is the sort of populist right, which as it were, dissident right, they now term woke light, i.e. that you do not look at certain, you only take scientific analysis so far. Once it gets into offensive areas, then you stop. And basically, what you're advocating is the liberalism of 50 years ago, really. And that's kind of the populist right, and then there's the radical right. But yeah, going back to what Paul was saying, as a concept, Konstantin Kisin has listed what they're saying, his view of the essence of the woke right. One, the West is bad. Well, anyone that's criticizing the current system is going to be arguing that to some extent the West is less than perfect.
The people.
Wait.
People are no stop. Like look at my face. I'm really irritated. Name the people on the woke right who are saying that the West is bad. There are some people who on the dissident right who are fond of Russian philosophy. So they argue that modernity is aggressive, but they're not criticizing the West per se. They're criticizing the Enlightenment project and modernity and capitalism, but not necessarily Western philosophy.
That's me.
What is he
A
saying?
lot of it is a straw man. A lot of it is taking the most extreme possible manifestation of what he calls the radical right, or whatever you want to call it, and say, So the second thing is conspiracy theories. That there's a huge, great big conspiracy theory. Well, that's
James
true.
Lindsay.
Some extremists.
That's James Lindsay's whole shtick.
Yeah,
Exactly, Paul. He's delusional.
Well, not even delusional. He's got raging hypocrisy and needs to buy a mirror.
But this is what I wanted
That's what I
to say.
said at the beginning, opportunism.
Yeah, wokeism is a political economy
But
problem.
Darren, doesn't opportunism normally imply some type of cleverness or some type of tactical awareness?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, you've got me on that one already.
Wokeism is a political economy problem. People like James Lindsay need wokeism to be sustained, because if wokeism has momentum, they get money, they write books, and they get speaking fees. So people like him, they require wokeism to be sustained, because that's how they make their living.
yeah. It's like once the extreme right in the UK, the British National Party, whatever. Once that collapsed, then the groups that are parasitic off that to make their living, Searchlight and Hope Not Hate, started accusing, the Conservative Party of being far right. I mean, literally put Rishi Sunak in their Hope Not Hate report. So this is showing you that it is as Lipton was saying, it is a grift. I mean, they must know this is absurd, but they have.
Go on,
Not only
Clifton.
are these people delusional, but I have strong reason to believe that they're so unaware that they're failing to recognize that the contemporary right in America is reverting to what the right was in the 50s and 40s. The right is becoming Nokian. These people, they like H.L. Mencken. They just don't know it because many of them might not be reading people like Albert J. Nock and Mencken. But those are the people they really admire. So the right is reverting to what it was in the 50s and before.
They say that there is a victim mentality, but I suppose anyone that doesn't have power is going to have a victim mentality. Mm-hmm. They say that the woke right, like the woke, perverts history, but I think this is a complete straw man. And what are they referencing there other than Holocaust denial? And there's no way that most people that are ethno-nationalists or whatever are Holocaust deniers. It engages in name calling. Well, that's the pot calling the kettle woke, isn't it? Because he's the one calling other people woke, which is a denigrating term, basically. And apparently it creates a culture of fear. Again,
that doesn't mean anything. That just doesn't mean anything. That's who's scared? Who's afraid? Who's afraid?
What is he afraid of? He's afraid that people. What is Konstantin Kisin afraid of? I'm going to meet Konstantin Kisin in February at a conference, so I shall put these things to him. But I mean, what? He's scared of some people saying some mean things to him on Twitter, is he? I don't understand. Not like people getting you sacked like the left do.
Well, so just to add to a couple of points that have already been raised, I have a graphics designer who works for me, and he's a young man, and he loves to use AI. And I was looking at graphic design in the AI space, and they have this term in AI graphic design. They call it AI slop. So when AI just keeps pumping out fucking images, our eyes are already becoming numb to it because we see it slop. It's just slop. And then I started to apply this term in my own head. I was thinking there is something called, or we should call it, to Paul's point earlier, anti-woke slop. It is just pumped out in the right-wing space, and it's slop. It gets views, it's guaranteed ad revenue, it's incentivized. We know why people are doing it. And I think that's what's blocking up the space. Now, if they had said not the woke right, but right-wing arseholes, yes, there are right-wing arseholes, absolutely. If they said hypersensitive or fragile, maybe fragile right-wingers would have been better. But they've deliberately used a term that was antagonistic and has a slur written into it. It's reaction-seeking behavior, and I think that's why it's rubbing everybody up the wrong way. It's actually not moving the conversation forward.
It's not, as you said. They've admitted that it's just a way of. It's basically a way of admitted. This is a good way of making people shut up. It's like I imagine two narcissistic chaps sitting down in the pub and saying, "Guess what? I've discovered this brilliant thing. It's called slapping a woman around the face. Slap her around the face really hard, and she'll shut up."
Do you know?
Does that help your relationship in any way? No, but it makes her shut up and stop saying that somebody's going to go at me. Great, I'll try that one. I mean,
you can go ahead.
Well,
I was just about to say, you don't have to respect the people I respect. But some time ago, I was on Twitter, and James Lindsay got a message from somebody saying that you should have a conversation with Paul Gottfried. And he said that Paul Gottfried is an idiot. And the moment he said that, I wrote him off completely.
I like Paul Gottfried. He's a good bloke.
Yeah, he's the brightest guy on the right.
Yes. I suspect, to your point there, Ed, about two blokes in a pub agreeing with each other, I think James Lindsay and Konstantin Kisin are too much on Twitter, and I'm sure they've been abused there. I'm sure they've been dogpiled. I'm sure that there's tons of right wingers have pissed them off, and this is the reaction to that: is to say, well, it's kind of basically a fuck you to people who are annoying them. And I'm not denying that people are annoying on both sides of the aisle.
The one time I got dogpiled, well, the most significant time I got dogpiled from the right was when I had somebody on here who's based and interesting and has interesting views, but is a male to female transsexual. And a homosexual transsexual, I should emphasize, but nevertheless a transsexual. And I'm confused.
Carry on.
It means that the person has thought they were a female from a very young age, rather than something that comes along in early adolescence or mid-adolescence.
Gotcha.
And they like to have sex with men, whereas about two-thirds of autogynephilous male to female transsexuals are lesbians.
Okay.
Anyway, so I did this, and so many people just got really, really, really upset, and I couldn't understand it. I was thinking, hang on, but we're in favour of logic and reason and stuff. This person happens to. A number of people have got upset because I had Lipton on, and I said, well, why?
Well, that's understandable.
Well, yeah, but that's not because he's black, though, but because he's so arrogant.
No, just because he's Lipton.
Yeah, just because he's conceited and thinks he's right. But yeah. So that's when I've been. Oh, and even having a few Jewish people on here. Actually, I was dogpiled from the right. So it does happen, and you feel angry, and I think you do feel like saying. I can see their point. You feel like saying you are a bit like woke people, and you are a bit like woke people in so much as you're putting certain things above the pursuit of truth, and you're purity signaling and all this sort of thing.
Okay, so this is the charitable point that I wanted to make earlier, which is I know where they're coming from. You have people who insist, the jolly heretic, I narcissistically have internalized you. I want you to interview these people. When you step out of my vision of you, I'm going to have a fucking shit fit and a tantrum, and I'm going to shout at you. I 100% get that. And there are so-called right wingers who are not based. They are fragile. They are demanding. They are infantile. They're all the things that we're not supposed to be. So my charitable point of view would be to say, yes, I get where you guys are coming from. But when you use terms like this, you're going to be called a grifter. It's just poor branding. You shouldn't have called it that.
Yeah, indeed. What else was it? I noted. Also, the other thing I think that's germane. Another thing he said, I think it was James Lindsay, was he said that you're like the woke, in so much as you are focused on winning, as if that's a bad thing, and you are basically putting certain things above the truth or something. Essentially, that's what he was saying. Now, I think this
just for clarity's sake, can you tell us when it's James Lindsay speaking and when it's the Archangel Michael?
Yes, I will. I will. Although I get the impression the Archangel Michael he channels himself through James Lindsay.
Right. So the
I
Archangel
think
Michael's he must have lost a bit of his mojo if he's picked James as his vessel.
Well, they called Jesus humble. Paul. he was the person whose birthday we've just celebrated. He was born humbly in a manger. And yeah, look, he grew up to become Jesus. So, by the way, an interesting point. I discovered this week that the Finnish word for duct tape is Jesus tape.
And we won't explain to viewers what the context of that is, will we?
I live in Finland, viewers, and so they call duct tape yesari, which means Jesus. So they say, "Oh God, I need something to stick this together. I'll get you some Jesus," and they're going because Jesus is strong and sticky. So yeah, there you go. That was
Darren. Pretend you didn't hear that, my love. Just delete all that.
It's too late. It can't be undone.
I'm so sorry. Darren is is in charge of his local orange order, and I don't.
Obviously, Ed, some people on the right are stupid. So maybe around 2 years ago, this person did an advertisement for a beer company. The individual was a trans woman. I don't support the trans hysteria, but this person was paid to do an advertisement. The company paying a person to advertise a product does not imply that the company was supporting the trans movement, and people on the right, they were infuriated. That was being stupid.
I tell you one thing that was a bit of a grift, and maybe I was guilty of it, but anyway, look, was when that girl presented this, that she'd done this doctoral thesis at Cambridge on the politics of smell, on olfactory ethics. And part of me just thought it'll make a good video and get a lot of people will view it if I slag her off. But then there was like a devil there saying that. But then there was an angel here saying, "But Ed, it sounds like a really interesting idea for a thesis."
But it's not groundbreaking.
And I'd quite like to read it. And
so Ed, can I clarify?
As well.
Ed, can I clarify? You're now claiming that occasionally, in exceptional circumstances, you'll do a very provocative and silly video.
If they ask, yeah.
This is news to me.
If enough people say, "Ed, please, I beg you, could you do a provocative video on that PhD student?"
Do another Angela Rayner impression.
No, that was fair enough though. I mean, she is ghastly. But then I'll say, well, to be fair, I mean, it was a kind of bollocks thesis, but by bollocks thesis standards, it was one of the better ones.
I was going to say, you're shooting fish in a barrel, aren't you, if you're picking dodgy PhD theses?
No. There's a long tradition in literature.
Sorry, Richard.
There is a long tradition in literature of showing how characters are used to reinforce social inequities. So her thesis is not that groundbreaking, really.
Yeah, but she did it specifically with smell, which I thought was quite interesting. I was once the keynote speaker at a conference on the anthropology of smell.
Oh,
yeah, it's quite it's I hope everyone's washed. One thing that I don't know if you've noticed this, chaps, but in Finland anyway, it's increasingly difficult to get hold of the stick type deodorant. And if you're extremely manly, then you need a powerful stick type deodorant.
Yes,
and
you do.
I had to get these from the UK. Because they seem to have stopped selling Lynx.
Can I just throw in here a linguistic fact that in Welsh there's no word for deodorant?
Really?
Yeah, there's a redundant concept in Wales.
They just don't bother.
Never been known, never used it, never will, don't need a word for it.
Okay. I suppose
racism. Pure racism.
Rather like the Finnish, there's no Finnish term for having good taste in clothes. It's a similar thing.
So that's why you're living there.
It doesn't exist. It's just bright clothes. Very, very bright clothes. That's it. There's no term for it. There's
Ed,
all of that.
can I read you something from Andrew Doyle's blog?
Okay.
Just in terms of defining terms, he wrote a piece on this. It's just very short, one paragraph. Like all entries in the culture war lexicon, the meaning of the term woke right has evolved rapidly. Konstantin Kisin, co-host of the Trigonometry podcast, has adopted the phrase to refer to those who identify as right wing, but whose tactics and perspectives mirror those of the woke left. Quote, every retardation has an equal and opposite retardation, he writes. The deranged worldview of the woke left, along with its disregard for truth, hatred of the West, and falsification of history, is now being replicated on the right. Sorry to be the guy who's constantly going on about psychology, but that sounds like somebody who's just pissed off with the shit he's received online. It's a reaction. It's in Freudian psychology, it's called it's a reaction formation. So and as I said earlier, the charitable viewers, they probably have been dogpiled by people who are fucking idiots, but they don't represent any political movement per se. I don't believe. I think they're arguing with people who are terminally online, and their world is very small. They're very narcissistic. They're very fragile. And if you step out of what they want you to say, they want you to be a sock puppet for their frustrations. And if you step outside of that, they will vehemently and disproportionately, in a narcissistic rage, attack you. So that's what I don't know if you think that has validity, but that to me sounds like a reaction formation.
I would agree. So I would agree, Richard. You and I talked previously, and one of the things we talked about was how people, especially in the online world, they create a version of you, maybe based on your photograph, your avatar, whatever. They just create this version of you, and that's what they're arguing with. That's what they're fighting with, not necessarily what you've said. If they actually took a moment and read what it is you've typed out or whatever, but they maybe just scan it briefly. They internalize that, turn it into whatever it is they find offensive, and then they attack.
Yes.
Can I just quickly defend the mad people?
Of course.
Because we're looking at all of this from the point of view of an audience that is being denigrated for valid reasons, but we're not really addressing what Konstantin Kisin and James Lindsay are doing, which is this is where I think goes to Lipton's point about grifting. They're making a great living off provoking people in a medium that's designed for provocation and clickbait. And when people act in a provoked and clickbaity way, they are then giving labels and calling them things and implying that somehow the audience is wrong. Well,
touche. That's a really good point. That's an excellent counterpoint.
100% correct. And another issue is that the rise of the woke right is associated with the aggressive criticisms of Israel. So I am pro-Israel, but Michael Rectenwald wrote a brilliant piece saying that the Jewish elites, they are the woke right. So people are becoming more critical of Israel, and that is amplifying criticisms of the individuals we label woke right.
Because it's applied to, what you're saying, what the Israeli elite are, well, not all of them, but a proportion of them is ethno-nationalists.
Yes.
And this is getting back to the meat of what Kisin and what the other chap Lindsay is saying. I think that it raises a fundamental issue that two things. One is I think they've just basically found quite a lucrative niche where you say, oh, I'm really brave and I criticize everything and I'm purely motivated by the empirical method and truth and whatever, but I won't criticize that.
Exactly.
Not that. Not that.
My sponsors won't let me criticize that.
Not that. I'm completely in favour of free speech, but not on that issue. I'm not on that issue. So it's this tightrope that they walk to get as much to balance having a niche of seeming brave, and getting money. That's the first thing. But the second thing is that they aver this fundamental condemnation of ethno-nationalism. It's almost like what Karl Popper argues in the Open Society. He basically condemns everything should be about the pursuit of truth. Everything should be about all this sort of stuff. But he doesn't seem to understand that people don't lay down their lives for the pursuit of truth. At least not many people. Perhaps the old heretic, Giordano Bruno, or someone like that. But you to have a space where we can have these logical, reasoned conversations and whatever, then you have to have a certain core of people that are motivated to defend the civilization from the enemies at the gate. And what motivates them is things like ethno-nationalism, or ethno-national, or religion, which is really just ethno-nationalism, or whatever. That's what motivates them, and that defends the space where you can you can have, as it were, civilization. So and they don't seem to understand that. They just say Kissinger has said nationalism is bad. Nationalism involves wars. And I think it's getting that balance right between being too. What was it, that guy Raymond Cattell? You know, remember Raymond Cattell, Lipton, and he said a society that is too open gets balkanized, falls apart. A society that's too closed doesn't. It becomes sterile and nothing really happens. Like
Stagnant.
you have to have that balance between the two.
Nationalism is a social technology like religion. Nationalism enables societies to scale up. Too much nationalism is a disaster. Too little is emasculation. That's what we're witnessing in the West today. And interestingly, on the libertarian right, although most libertarians are not nationalists, the earlier libertarians appreciated nationalism. They weren't rabidly anti-nationalist. They could understand why people would fight a war to protect the homeland, because we're biological creatures. Naturally, we prefer our in-group to the out-group, and the nation state is like an extension of our wider family. It's the extended family at the macro level. That's why I view the nation state, even though I am not a nationalist myself, but I can appreciate why one would endorse nationalism.
Why aren't you a nationalist, Lipton?
I am not a nationalist because I don't like identity politics, and nationalism is divisive. Secondly, I'm a libertarian and I prefer money to race. And if you are a nationalist, you're going to put your race, the tribe, over earning and productivity. So it's just like immigration. I am pro-immigration, but I am anti-mass immigration, and I prefer the immigration of Europeans to America and the developing world than the importation of Indians.
Why?
Based.
Why?
Indians meant to be brilliant.
Why about Indians look? So some time ago, I wanted to make the point on your show that Indians are aggressive. They are more likely to be managers, according to Richard Nisbet, due to their personality. And even when the Indians went to Trinidad as indentured laborers quite early, as early as the 1870s, they were telling the colonial government that they wanted to have their festivities and they would not be disturbed. And they entered politics early. They started civil society organizations early. Indians are quite aggressive and tribal. And whenever they migrate to a country, usually they're not as aggressive as Muslims, but they're a dominant group. They form their own societies. They're really planning.
It doesn't make Darwin any less right or wrong.
Yes. So
Anyway.
there's this article quoting Moody as saying that the Indian diaspora is important and Indians, they should influence politics in the US. So the Indians, they want to copy the tactics of the Jewish diaspora, and Jews are influential in America, especially in democratic politics. It's just a sophisticated form of racial group politics.
I suppose another argument is we're in heavy. The problem no one wants to talk about openly is that we're in dysgenics in Western countries. And so it could even be argued that if you're intellectually capable of being employed, then you're probably employed. And so the idea that we can't have immigration, we should just get Americans to be doctors or British people to be doctors or whatever. Well, they're not clever enough. The people that are clever enough to be doctors by any reasonable standard in Britain are doctors. And there aren't enough intelligent people to fill the doctor spaces that the society needs. So you have to bring in intelligent foreigners or have bad doctors. I don't
Quick point, Ed. Remember, So I think we need to do more studies on the psychosocial development of society. So in some societies, it's quite plausible for a man to be highly intelligent and pro-social, but at the same time, due to the cultural fabric of his society, he has no problem molesting a little girl. I don't know if you knew this, but several media reports have shown that foreign doctors are likely to be responsible for sexual harassment in the health system.
Yeah, I did know that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
So educated elite from other countries, due to their cultural background, they have different beliefs. Some are quite strange.
okay, yeah, we do have plenty. It's not. We do have plenty of that's true. Brait in fame. I'm just playing devil's avocado to some extent. But where was I? The other thing, though, with regard to this woke right thing, though, Richard, that is true, is that the personality type that is woke is dark triad, and so is the personality type that is well, like on average, like that they skew towards dark triad, both ends. So that's true. It's narcissism among those that are far left, and it's a Machiavellianism, and it's psychopathy among those that are far right. So it is true that there is a resemblance in so much as those three, the triad, intercorrelate. I mean, there is some truth in that.
There is, and I think when you're arguing with people on social media, we all have to learn this because we're all online. You are not arguing with any kind of meaningful representative sample of a population. You're arguing with extremists or people who are terminally fucking unemployed. They're just online all the time. They're not out there living. These are not, if they're arguing with you back and forth, they have not had a good orgasm in the last 48 hours. They are not in a loving relationship. They do not have purpose. They're not healthy. They didn't read a good book in the last week. These are people who are miserable. And I'm not defending Kissin and Lindsay on this. Paul's point earlier was correct. Like if they've made a rod for their own backs, then they should sleep in the bed, to mix the metaphor. And they're grown men, and they know what they're doing. I get that. It's just I can't emphasize enough this point that yes, sometimes when we're online being dogpiled, the people at the front of the queue to dogpile you are not normal, happy, fulfilled individuals. These are people who walk past you at the bus stop muttering with 3 plastic bags, talking to themselves and rocking. Some of them, not all of them, but many of them. And it's good to remember that the people who are arguing with you online are not happy individuals.
Could I ask a specific question? You know, what bothers me when I talked about the conceptual looseness of what they're doing, one specific example would be when they say people on the right want to cancel people or censor things, therefore they're exactly the same as people on the left. There should be more nuance to that. So, for example, I am overwhelmingly in favour of free speech, but there's always a but. And in my case, it's always when under 18s are involved, there has to be a requirement or social standards of what, for example, young children are exposed to. So I have no problem with censorship at a young age in certain circumstances, whereas there's an element of the left don't think there's anything that young kids shouldn't be exposed to.
Yeah, or women.
Right, but when it's beyond 18, all bets are off. Knock yourself out, read whatever you want. I don't believe in censorship at all. But I'd argue...
Paul, the whole notion of this having an arbitrary border at 18 is crazy, isn't it? I mean, some people are mature enough.
But you have to have a border. Yeah, you have to have a border. My only point is, part of the right in America are objecting to extremely graphic sex ed in schools, and you're talking for 6, 7, 8-year-olds. Now, if it makes me right wing to say that's inappropriate, I'm right wing and I'm a censor bigot.
It is inappropriate.
But what I'm saying is that's not the same as suggesting anyone over 18 should be limited in how they vote or what they say or what they read, which is elements of the left.
But couldn't we, Paul? Couldn't we nuance it further? Couldn't we say, well, look, among the general population who are over 18, some people are quite stupid, so they should probably they should be their stuff should be censored.
Why? Why should stupidity?
Well, why not? Why not? Like we used to have this in. If we're going to do it to children, and we're going to have an arbitrary line of 18.
I'm not. No. Wait. Listen a second. I'm not saying we protect children because children are more stupid. That's a completely separate issue. I'm saying children aren't fully developed, and children have a period of innocence, and that should be protected.
They're vulnerable.
Yeah, and they should be protected until people like you, Ed, get to deal with them. But they have to have that safety period of time. Whereas you're talking about stupid people, it's a completely separate issue.
So hang on. So you're saying, so your argument is that there is a developmental period, like the period where a cat has to bond with humans or it never will, and that should be protected. That childhood, stroke puberty.
Am I saying anything controversial?
Well, it's interesting because I mean there was research in Greenland in about 1910, and it found that the age of menarche in Greenland was 21. So among the Greenlandic,
The age of what? The age of menage.
Yes.
What's that? What's menage?
Your first period.
Menage.
Yes.
Thank you for the education.
Quite right.
MERCHE.
Richard, I just assumed there were 3 people involved. That's all I got.
Like, what are they doing in Finland at 21? It is time for your menage.
If the age of menage for Greenlandic or monarch for Greenlandic girls was 21, they're realistically not going to have a menage a trois till they're about 30.
So Ed, if you can always point to the exception. So in Greenland, as a self-contained community, they come to their own arrangement as to what's culturally and socially acceptable.
Well, likewise, then among the pygmies of the Congo, the age of menopause is 37. So again, the age of menarche is about 7. So we would have to. They would again come.
Yeah,
to
so silly me. I just assumed we were talking about Western societies that were all.
That's very white-centric of you.
But Ed,
Racist.
I get what you're saying.
Misanthrope.
I get what you're saying 150%, but one could argue that in some communities, especially in unstable environment, girls experience their period at earlier ages.
They do. If they get raped by their dad or whatever, they can get period.
Or if their father is missing, father absent,
dude,
lead to early sexual
or if they have a stepfather.
Dude, my channel, my brand.
Oh, sorry.
Lipton, I think this has taken us away from the fact that in Midwest America, for example, I don't think 7-year-olds need to learn about the joys of anal sex.
Not at all.
They don't.
However
don't.
However many Greenlanders, Inuits, Pygmies,
they don't.
You want to throw into the conversation, you're never going to convince me that that's right.
If we have any Greenlandic people watching, hello. I know there's only a few 100,000 of you, but no, that's wrong. That's Icelandics. I know there's only 60,000 of you, but hello.
And you're about to become part of America. Cheers.
I think that might be a bad idea, Greenlandic people. Anyway, if you are Greenlandic, then do call in. I interviewed a Greenlandic person once, the Bishop of Greenland. She was lovely. Okay, so we're about halfway through. So to those of you who are new, hello. Welcome to the Jolly Heretic. We are an online public house. We meet on Mondays, 7 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. New York, which discuss based science and generally interesting stuff, which is excluded from your woke joke universities. And if you're new to the channel, could you please, this is the Jolly Heretic, could you please subscribe? It helps me most violently if you do that. Could you subscribe here on YouTube, and could you subscribe to my Substack? That's jollyheretic.com, where I put all the most base stuff I can't put on YouTube, where I put in-person interviews, where I put films I make and all kinds of malarkey, and where I am indeed as crass a Darwinist as there could ever be, and proudly so, because I don't have to engage in fallacious arguments like appeal to insult and so forth, and then say that that's pearl clutching. Whatever that means.
You're right, woke. You're right, woke.
Right, yeah. Woke right.
And anyway, so subscribe there. And you can follow my books. They are, of course, available on Amazon. The newest one is Woke Eugenics, How Social Justice is a Master of Darwinism. And I will submit to the publisher literally tomorrow my Jonathan Bowden biography. So if you have anything that I don't have in that, for God's sake, send it to me in the next 24 hours. Also, could you subscribe to Lipton's channel? That's the old Lipton Matthews there. and his channel is called Lipton Matthews. And could you subscribe to right, I'll respond to that later. And if you could subscribe to Richard's channel, you're probably watching it. If you're a chap, then subscribe to Richard's channel, the Richard Brannon Philosophy channel. And if you're one of those lovely ladies of the kind that most of us on this panel met and enjoyed meeting in Liverpool, and who we found to be both sensitive, intelligent, and beautiful, and who
help me,
and who certainly Paul tells me he's thought a lot about when he's alone at night.
Why am I getting Terry Thomas vibes here?
Could you? He's banked a lot of you. He told me when we were in Liverpool that there were many for his internal mental bank. Then could you please subscribe on Richard's channel, Richard Brannon and Friends. And then we have Dr. Paul Taylor there, and his channel is covered up by crop layout press shift. Here we go. Readers of the Lost Art, where he looks into things like art and philosophy from a kind of grumpy, bearded wizard perspective.
Manic depressive outlook, yeah.
And then finally we have a jolly Northern Irish chappie there, and his channel is it just called Darren McGee, or is there any more?
Darren F. McGee. Do you have any idea how many Darren McGees there are in the world? That's why I'm Darren F. McGee.
Okay, so what does your channel do, Darren?
I talk about mental health stuff. I talk about relationships. I talk about personality types, narcissism, that sort of thing, and different therapeutic approaches and styles and modalities. So a wide range of stuff.
So Darren, full disclosure, how long have you been treating Ed?
It's great.
Isn't this whole thing a conflict of interest?
We have patient therapist confidentiality. So basically Darren's channel is like Richard's channel, but the form of seduction is more kind of subtle. Okay, so do all that and whatever. Now we have a resident poet here at the Jolly Heretic Public House, Mr. Quinn, and he has sent in the following poem for our delectation and delight. The subject on offer tonight, a concept that's known as woke right. There's something that's missing from Constantine kissing. I reckon he's not very bright. That's excellent. Thank you very much. I particularly like the kissing and missing. That's excellent, Mr. Quinn, and thank you very much indeed. Cheers, Mr. Quinn. And if you would like to buy Mr. Quinn's book of Jolly Heretic poetry, then it is, of course, available on the old Amazon. Now, I just like to read with regard to wokeness something else with regard to sort of wokeness and power and something. If you can talk.
Sorry, Ed, before you do.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Darren, what are you drinking?
I have what's left of a Guinness.
All right,
and I have a little famous grouse, smoky black.
All right, good on you.
Okay.
Sorry, Ed. Very rude.
I was just going to say, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise.
That's very good, Ed. Is that yours?
No, it's Kipling. Okay,
yeah,
now
I said that Kipling. I was just about to say that.
Darren, that's a regular feature of the program.
Normally, I watch you guys while I'm doing the ironing.
Okay.
It's
All
different.
right, so you know
it's
all this.
different being on tonight, and I can't help but feel the average IQ of the channel has just dropped dramatically having me on, but still, it's nice to be here.
Oh no, I'm sure that can't be the case. But
You've cut down on Ed speaking, Darren. So
I want to continue with Richard's point. Let me tell you why I dislike Twitter. I'm not artistic, but I pay attention to patterns, and I can spend several hours, at least up to 2 hours, observing the patterns on Twitter. And I've recognized that people, both the larger accounts and the smaller accounts, they post the same stories. Even when the story is incorrect and there's a community note saying this is garbage, people still repost the same story. And followers either bypass the community note or they don't care. But it is so lame Furthermore, I have a problem with the IQ fetish on Twitter. So some of these clones will say, several of my friends with IQs of over 150 work at a bank. That's crap. Most people don't have an IQ of 150. Even if you went to Yale or Harvard, you will meet people with an IQ of over 140, 139, 147, but you're not going to have a lot of friends with an IQ of over 150. So you're right, Richard. They're liars.
Basically liars. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just give my thoughts just on what you're saying there, Lipton? You're right about the patterns and so on. I'm going back to something Richard had said earlier. Whenever people are dogpiling you and they're attacking you, you're right. There is the dark triad. There's the dark tetrad as well. That's where you see a lot of the sadism, a lot of the cruelty, the threats, and so on. But there is something that I've been looking into recently, and it really comes from our mutual friend Mark Vicente, who, he has said many times about how whenever people like cult leaders are exposed, whenever people are caught out, if they're finger in the till, doing whatever it is, there are those who are still loyal. They refuse to accept the reality that this person was a villain. I think you're seeing the same kind of thing on a different kind of scale, but you're seeing the same kind of thing on things like Twitter. And I think what you're really looking at is what's known as vicarious narcissism. And that's where people are getting their supply, their hit, whatever it is, from being a part of something, believing something, being in part of a movement, whatever it happens to be. An attack on one of them is attack on all of them. There are a lot of different levels to vicarious narcissism, but it's just something I've been reading a lot about recently, and it's ticking quite a few boxes.
Yeah, it's like people who think that being followed by Elon Musk is an achievement.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the fact he follows me, Lipton's neither here nor there.
There was, both Lipton and Darren said something that was cooking in the back of my head. I when I was younger, I really liked gangster rap, and a lot of what drives the sales forward is I know you don't, my dear. I know you don't. Is
sorry, I was
beefs.
trying to do it.
Oh, I thought you were doing thumbs down, thumbs. Oh, you were doing gang signs. Brap, brap, Dr. Paul Taylor. And a lot of what drives it is beef, is confrontation. So I inflict a narcissistic injury on you. I diss you in a rap. Everybody goes, ooh, wow. And then you do it back and you satirize me and mock me lyrically through aggressive poetry. And the point of vicarious narcissism and Twitter, when you have the safety of being in the audience, but front row, you are getting that hit. You're absolutely right. You're getting that supply. But it really, the reason I don't use Twitter is it is just attack and counterattack. And then it seems to be a war of who can be the most snide and the most snarky. And there's only so much of that quality of communication I can take on before I start to get a headache over my right eyeball. I'm like, this is just high schoolish. And it's diss after diss. You diss me, I diss you, back and forth. It's crap. It's absolute garbage, but vicarious narcissism is I think that's a really big piece of the puzzle. That's a very interesting concept.
Vicarious narcissism it's one step away from supporting your local football team and being upset when your local football team loses and being happy when it wins. I mean,
it's just like that quote that Vivek made on Twitter. So he was accusing Americans of having of having an anti-intellectual culture. People responded hysterically, but nobody said, okay, Vivek, this is the reality. The truth is that most of the immigrants who really make up a difference are not Indians. The average Indian who migrates to America is better educated than the average Indian who stays home. So the Indians who migrate to America, they are from the upper class. But when you compare these Indians to Europeans, the Europeans earn more and they're more innovative. So nobody said to Vivek, well, we get your point, but Indians in America are not a reflection of Indians in India. India is a low human capital country with a failing education system.
Even English people in Australia, i.e. most of people in Australia, are not a reflection of English people in England. They're cleverer. The average IQ of English ancestor Australians is
they weren't clever enough not to get caught, though, were they?
No, but that's an earlier wave of migration. So but
genetically that must be much more significant.
That's true. But you have the founding wave.
See, I'm learning.
You are. You're doing very well.
It's all about
You
genetics.
you have the founding wave, but then you have all of the more recent migration. And those people, particularly the 10-pound poms, of which there were many, would have probably been quite high in IQ. So you have the same thing in Canada among white Canadians. They're more migration is predicted by intelligence, and so
You've got to have the wherewithal to emigrate, don't you?
You've got to have the wherewithal. You've got to have the future orientation. You've got to have the money. You've got to have all kinds of qualities that will tend to be associated with intelligence, and also kind of a certain kind of character as well. And they migrate. So often religiousness weirdly predicts migration, possibly because religious people have a sense of the future, a sense of eternity, a sense of something greater. So even though religious people are conservative on average, they are more inclined to migrate, which it may be why America is so religious. It's been passed
So,
on.
Ed, is your presence in Finland the exception that proves the rule?
Well, I am but a data point of one, so I don't think we can read much into.
But you are the most handsome data point, Ed.
I am a handsome data point, and if my friend Tommy, though, if he's watching, he's very intelligent, so he proves the rule. Yeah, that's in general how it tends to work.
Yeah, but nobody is really discussing the H-1B visa issue on a critical level. The reality is that other than the studies that were published by industry groups, scientific studies show that there is not a shortage of STEM laborers, and scientists decades ago they lobbied for the importation of foreign intellectuals to deflate labor expenses, and that's not a conspiracy.
I think that the other thing that's ridiculous about it is to say that if you get a degree, you should be allowed a green card. That's crazy. Any stupid idiot can get a degree, even in a STEM subject, at least from a crap university of the kind. I mean, the standards of some of these American universities are so low. It's beyond anything, even in Britain, that you can comprehend. So,
can I just add, sorry if it's slightly tangential, but one thing I noticed as I was leaving the university sector was there's a high proportion of, at the time before Brexit, a lot of EU academics, but they disproportionately, it's casual empiricism, but my observation was disproportionately, they were incredibly bureaucratically minded. And more than anything else, they contributed to the decimation of the old scholarly standards and scholarly collegiality, and everything became bureaucratic. And I just think it's a sometimes unacknowledged aspect. There's all the genuine diversity that high-level immigration brings, but there's also some quite subtle cultural differences that are quite destructive.
Yes, like as I said, I don't have a problem with giving somebody a green card after graduating, because I think that it should be easy to migrate. America is number one for scaling talent. So if you are ambitious, you're going to want to live in America. And I'm a capitalist and I'm pro-market. So the labor system should make it easy to allocate labor and capital. But at the same time, I am realistic and I want us to appreciate that some immigrants are more productive than others.
It's quite ironic, really. So the English universities went from being basically rubbish to being respected because they imitated German universities. And then you're saying that basically, or continental universities, effectively, and then continentals come to Europe, come to our universities, which had become like the old German universities, and ruined them.
Well, what's interesting is it's about the emigration thing. Disproportionately, people that would leave the German or the Italian or the Greek education system are the ones who didn't fit into that collegiate model. So they're exiles from their own collegiate land, and they made good time of the quickest way they could climb up the greasy pole was to become admin weasels.
Yeah,
and that's how they did it.
The worst thing at universities, universities coped in the old days without much admin, and you get more and more and more of it, and even them offering degrees in how to be an administrator.
What also became a major aspect of promotion was your admin ability, which
your ability to get grants, your ability to do anything other than actually write highly original scientific papers. That wasn't good. That was bad. And if you did do a scientific paper, it had to be as part of a team of about 20 people. rather than, as we know, it's individuals, slightly mental individuals, that solve the big problems, isn't
We
it?
should change topic, Ed, though, because this will just be a self-help group for you and I.
Exactly.
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying 150%.
Can you stop agreeing? Can you stop agreeing? You've done this twice now, Lipton.
No, but if it's logical, I'm going to agree. So, for example, based on what I have read, based on what I've read and what I know, continental universities are no longer exceptional. So I'm not going to disagree for the sake of disagreeing.
Fair enough. No, they're not. They're not. I don't know. I mean, it's we're in that kind of stage of civilization. It reminds me of Victorian England, really, where you have the dissenting academies. But the dissenting academies are things like online things and whatever, rather than physical places. But yes, Darren, you haven't said anything for a while. What's in your head apropos what we're talking about?
Whiskey.
Whether or not I should finish this. Really, no, I'm kind of just listening to other people, and I do pick up on points, but if I don't say something immediately, I have to wait for it to come back to me. So,
Northern Ireland is a province where people have been subject to mortality salience far more recently than England.
Mm-hmm.
And far more recently. I mean, in England, it's my granddad's generation, born in the 20s, or people born in the 30s that experienced the war were evacuated. With people in Northern Ireland, it's still 1997, 1998. So it's a recent thing, and
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that makes people less inclined towards things like wokeness. But then on the other hand, I hear that if you walk down the Shankill now, there's rainbow flags everywhere. So I don't know. I mean,
Well, see, this is a curious thing. Now, I grew up during the 80s, the 90s. And what you would have found, bear in mind, this is in the days before social media. If you were looking at the news channels, you hear people being interviewed, they were usually interviewing people from the extremes. Now, it's not that moderate voices weren't there, but like so many times, the moderate voices get drowned out. You know, the people that they're saying things like, you know, we need to negotiate something here. We need to settle something. It's not a good idea to go around killing each other. They would get their say, and then they're kind of silenced, and then the extremists come in talking about why it's the other side that are all bad. So again, you have those extremists taking over. If we'd have had social media back then, you know, if you can imagine how fast that would have spread, you know, but back then you just had newspapers, TV shows, things like that. So what you had, people talked about, we had these two communities that couldn't live together. Now, this is the thing about Ireland. Ireland is a small enough island, but Northern Ireland in and of itself, it doesn't matter where you are in Northern Ireland, you're never more than 2 hours away from somewhere. You know, that's how small we are. It wasn't two communities, it was a divided community. And there were people, going back to what I was saying earlier on about opportunists and so on, there were people who were getting status, they were getting power, they were getting elected, they were getting to be, I don't know, what would you call them, brigadiers or something of their own little estates that they lived on. They were, if you will, they were doing quite well out of the Troubles. You know, when the peace process came and when the moderate voices were negotiating and so on, what you had was the extremists. Now, the extremists were still there. Maybe this is my cynical mind. I would like to think there was something genuine in wanting to find a way forward and wanting to find peace. But you would have had extremists who were maybe seeing that the way forward and a new kind of power base was to be fighting for peace. So what you would have had was a lot of people suddenly becoming politicians, community workers, and things like that. The community, we're talking maybe a generation later, it's from 1998. There's a whole generation has been born and grown up not knowing what came before. But some of them are actually kind of romanticizing it. It's something like, you know, it's like the French Resistance or something like that. No, it wasn't. It was an absolutely horrific time to live. Yes, those extremists, you would have had things like, you mentioned the Orange Order earlier, Free Presbyterians. You would have had republicanism, nationalism. I think it is odd now. You're right that you can go into places that would have had flags and things for paramilitary groups are now having rainbow flags and so on. It is quite a strange thing. But I tend to look at it as it really is just the same thing. It's just opportunists. It is people who buy into something. Again, going back to the vicarious narcissism, they feel a part of something they think is important. They're getting some kind of validation from it, some kind of power from it, some kind of acceptance from it, whatever. It's really just the same thing. It's just shifted. That's all.
Darren, could I ask, because it strikes me that Sinn Féin have morphed seamlessly into the whole woke agenda. And my reading of that would be ideological autism is what it is, and it just finds a different host.
No, I would like to say I'd agree with you, but I'd like to hear a bit more about what you mean by the intellectual.
Well, it would be my take, rather than talk about right woke versus left woke.
Yeah.
The extremes of both the spectrum to me are characterized by what I call ideological autism. It's the refusal to deviate from your accepted worldview. And that exists on the left and the right. It just happens that in the hierarchy of institutional power in the UK and America, blah, 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 it's the ideologically autistic left are in the ascendancy. That these things shift, but the common denominator is always, and I think this is where the grifting comes in. I think people who are ideologically autistic will just jump on the next ship.
Well, again, what you have, and hammering on about vicarious narcissism here. If these people are for this, they're not on my side. That means we must be for this. We have to be against it, and that's kind of, I think, how it works. So they find something, they're either for something or against something. It's either because the other side are for it or against it, they will take the opposite view. But the other side do exactly the same. Therefore, we must be against it.
Sorry to interject. The Israel-Palestine thing in Northern Ireland is quite interesting in that regard, isn't it? That the Protestants traditionally were pro-Israel because the Catholics were pro-Palestine. It was very clear.
But I can relate to what Darren's saying, because I can't give you the exact date, but it was as the Troubles were ending. I was drinking with some people in Manchester, and friends of friends arrived, and I wasn't told who they were, but I think they were connected back in Ireland. And I found it deeply disturbing, because I tried to have what I considered, other people might disagree, a reasonable discussion about Northern Ireland. I'm speaking to a fellow Catholic, so I had social capital as a Catholic, and I was saying my, disagreement with IRA tactics and IRA ideology, and it was just palpable. The belief in the IRA at that time among certain sectors was a substitute for some type of religious belief. Yeah. I'm not talking about Catholicism. I'm saying it was a zealotry that had replaced traditional forms of zealotry.
Yeah. It's going back to that.
You couldn't get through to it.
It's having. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say your point about people who haven't lived through that. What disturbs me is they don't appreciate where the current zealotry can lead. Without sounding like old Father Time, you and I have seen it.
No, not at all. It's that old saying, and it's all sound like a cliche, but those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Yeah, it's a zealotry. It goes back to that having something to belong to, something that gives me purpose, something that gives me a sense of belonging. Again, if you look at it in social media, one person with a particular belief, ideology, political slant, whatever, one of them gets criticized. The person who criticized them gets dogpiled on.
The need for that, though, putting it back to a kind of the kind of area that Richard and increasingly myself write about, the need for a very strong identity. The need for that is associated itself with mental instability. So if we go back to what Richard was saying about these kinds of people that are terminally online, and this idea of vicarious narcissism as well, and it could be argued that Paul mentioned autism. Autism, I don't know if it correlates with narcissism, but there is a path to it. Autism is associated with neuroticism, which is associated with narcissistic personality disorder. So you can see that it's those kinds of unstable. They have a need for a very strong sense of identity, and if they are high in anxiety, this often makes them socially uber conformist.
But there's also a cultural element because, for example, the most rabidly IRA people I ever met in my life were North Americans, because I think at some level they weren't back in the homeland and they felt guilty at some level, so they overcompensated. Some of the most rabid pro-Israelis I've met haven't fought in the IDF. They haven't lived in Israel, and they overcompensate. Some of the most reasonable Israelis I've met fought in the IDF. So they don't have this overwhelming need to prove themselves. They can afford to be more reasonable.
But also, I suppose you could argue that I wonder if these Americans that go on and on about how there's a chap in Oulu like this. He's an American. He's from North Carolina. His ancestors went to America in about 1700, something like that. And this desire to have an Irish identity. You're not Irish, you're bloody American. But he goes on and on about it. I assume it's a desire to have a very strong identity and a desire to be a bit different. And if you need to be a bit different, then one of the ways you can do that is by taking on a very extreme form of an identity.
But what got interesting, I happened to be in New York when 9/11 happened. I was at a wedding on the Saturday, and it happened on the Tuesday, I believe. And what was fascinating about that was I'm arguing at the time with people from NORAID, American supporters of the IRA, and overnight their attitude to terrorism changed. They'd been funding it for decades, but all of a sudden, it was the new Satan. It's amazing how quickly things change.
Once someone is exposed to new information, and again, when we exposed to new information, we tend to learn new things. We reappraise our belief system and so on. There are those who will just double down on it. That new information means they're going to lose a part of themselves. It's always like a psychological.
New information creates cognitive dissonance, and so it has to be destroyed. Hang on, yes. We have a question from. I'll just answer this question from Trad Culture Preservation. Thank you, sir. He says, continuing our chat about matrilineal societies, are you aware of the research of groups such as the Mosua or the Kazi, where sex differences are reversed? Women are more competitive than men, men more altruistic and nurturing than women taking more risks than men, etc. See Ganese et al. 2009. Thank you, sir. My understanding is that this is just another example of a matrilineal society, and we've already looked at why they exist. And my understanding is that the women do all the housework and stuff and are trained to do so. So I'm not sure that it's as extreme as you're saying. I get the impression that the examples you've given are just other examples of matrilineal societies, and we've explored why they exist. But I'll have a look at that book. Thank you for your recommendation. Thank you very much. I also have
there's another.
Didn't Ed's description as he was reading it remind you of Liverpool on a Saturday night?
Did a little bit, yeah. To be honest with you.
Well, in what sense? In the sense of
the
hyper-competitive, aggressive women. The last time I did the door, the only time I got physically hurt was by mad Scouse women. The worst one was Mother's Day in Liverpool. You had daughters, mothers, and granddaughters. They'd been drinking for 6 hours. They were coked up, fight with each other, going, "Hey, you fucking slag, I'll kill you." And you'd be like, "Ladies, stop." Scratch you, slap you. Very aggressive, very, very aggressive, Eds. That's my input.
Okay.
Ed, we can also do some research on the bonobos. There are some academics who argue that the feminine behavior of male bonobos, that's exaggerated.
Yeah, we talked about the bonobos the other week, didn't we? Yeah, I think they can. Okay. The next question comes from JD, and he says, when girls take selfies, they often position the camera high above and look up, so the viewer looks down on the girl. Something a man would never do. What is this? Something sexual?
This
I
is the position I would be in when performing fellatio. Yes, it's sexual.
I think that.
Thank you for sharing.
The man is taller than the woman.
Oh, sorry, Richard. I thought you were speaking directly then. No, you were.
Oh no, I was
Oh,
answering the
okay.
question. Sorry, mate.
My
I had a mental image. Whoa!
It's because the man is taller than the woman. He likes the idea of being taller than her. It induces protective instincts, so it makes her seem more innocent and sexy. And look in the reverse. Mussolini had photos taken from below to make himself seem taller and dominant. But okay, yeah, I'll change that idea. That's too simple. It's because that's the position she would be in when she was filleting him, unless they were engaging in a 69er. Okay. Now, good. So, moving off from it makes her look thinner, says Charlie Pepper.
Yeah, it's slimming. It's also slimming. Very slimming.
Is it?
So chunky ladies do it, yeah, and they use black and white photos. Slimming.
And they wear black. If they have huge asses or something, they wear black, and it makes their asses look smaller.
Apparently, I wouldn't know, but that's what I've been told.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think they do, Ed. I think in contemporary times, comedy arses, as I like to call them, I've seen comedy arses in leggings.
I don't think any.
Whereas in my generation, you hid a comedy arse.
Exactly.
But now
it's
out.
changed.
It's proud.
It's changed. It's the. Well, we all know what it is, but yeah, in the 80s or whatever, or the 90s, women would be bullied for having big asses, whereas now
it's cultural appropriation. Surely it's Jamaican cultural appropriation, Lipton, isn't it?
What, the big ass?
To like a big batty.
Yeah, they do. But cultural appropriation is good.
No, but I'm
especially when it relates to big asses.
Lipton, I'm using comedy arse in a very technical sense that Ed might relate to. I'm referring to comedy in the sense of massive disproportionality. So a big base is fine on a big frame. But when you basically got a borderline anorexic woman with a comedy disproportionate
that's
backside.
a BBL, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously the best asses are among the Bushmen of the Kalahari. They have steatopygus bottoms.
Yes.
Which they use to transport their children on. The children stand on the buttocks and then they're transported along.
Ed, Ed, who is responsible for the View, CBS or ABC?
The what?
The View.
The View with Whoopi Goldberg. CBS or
Talking
ABC?
about big arses, who's in charge of the View?
Yeah, I think we should be on the View. We should be on the View.
What is the View, Lipton? I don't really know what that
That
is.
show with Whoopi
Oh,
Goldberg.
Ed, you've got to check it out.
Yeah, we should be on
Liquid diarrhea from Satan's arse. It's terrible.
Is the View like this morning, Richard and Judy, that sort of thing?
Way worse.
Whoopi Goldberg.
But
It's
we
like
should
the
be on the View. They should
it's
be
like the
fired.
opening scene of Macbeth. It's terrible.
We should replace them.
We should.
Yes.
The male view will be the boys' view.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately, yes.
That is steatopygus buttocks.
What does steatopygus mean?
But
It's just fat. It's just muscle. There's no fat there. That's the buttocks.
Where do I go to see more of this?
Namibia.
Oh, thank you.
And then they're
please stop waving your selfie about.
Labia hangs down about 6 inches, about 3 inches between their legs, and adheres together like a banana skin. And they do little dances with them for the men.
Wow, it's ABC, Lipton.
And then Namibia goes to Namibia, and apparently he's talking about that is being a Darwinist, but it's just true. Whereas people's buttocks and vaginal lips are not like that in England or Liverpool.
This is brilliant preparation for when I am finally sectioned. I'll know fully what to expect.
Well, particularly if you were sectioned in a prison in Namibia, in the land of the Capoids.
He could escape by standing on a woman's buttocks and climbing over the wall.
I suppose one place you could go to see it, other than Namibia, because the Swazi people, they are genetically about 50%, or they call themselves, what is it now, the Ekanus or something. They are 50% Bushman and 50%.
It's the one. It's called ES. That's
Yeah.
what they call themselves.
50% Bantu. And the king of Swaziland, he has about 100 wives.
It's what
They do a ceremony once a year where they all dance naked or whatever in front of him, and then the best one gets made his wife. So you could go to the king of Swaziland's marrying ceremony, and
I would certainly have a go.
On yesterday, there's this black person I know who likes my writing, so he invited me to this WhatsApp group, and the people in the WhatsApp group were talking about Africa and issues affecting black people. So I said, look, Africans have a cognition problem, and that was an ambiguous statement, and
Good.
people left the group.
Keep ambiguous.
Yeah, they left the group. They left the group after I said that.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
They sound to me like woke Africans.
Yes, they are. They left the group.
They have a woke mindset. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap up now. So I hope the conclusion that the Jolly Heretic Public House appears to have come to is that the woke right is a silly idea, and is a consequence of the narcissism of the people that have come up with this silly idea. So that's I think that's that. That's sorted. So yeah. So thanks a lot, chaps. Thank you, Lipton. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Darren. So does anyone have anything to add before I wrap up?
No, dear. That was
right,
more than enough.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. And let us have a based and crass Darwinian and jolly interesting,
large buttocked,
and narcissism analysing 2025, and we will all see you on next Monday. And goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.